Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Policy Network on AI's second workshop this month. I'm Maikki Sipinen, and I'm helping to coordinate the PNAI. And I'm here today with Audace, who is a PNAI facilitator. Today we have all come together to hear presentations and discuss and give feedback on two discussion papers by PNAI active members. So without further complications and me taking much time, our agenda today is very simple. We have a short opening from Audace, and after that we jump right into discussing the first discussion paper. That's about environmental sustainability and the generative AI value chain. So we hear the presentations from our drafting team leaders and have a chance to reflect and give feedback on that work. And after that, we have a discussion paper on AI governance, interoperability, and good practices. And similarly, we first hear a couple of words from the drafting team leaders, and then we have a joint discussion and feedback session on that discussion paper. And finally, as always, we close the business with going through our next steps for the PNAI and any other business that might come up. And we know our subgroups have been working super hard to write these discussion papers, and they are of excellent quality, I think we can already say. So before we let the groups talk, I'll give the floor to Audace Niyonkuru, our facilitator. Audace, if you want to say a few words to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Maikki, and welcome everyone to this call. As Maikki just mentioned, today we're going to have the drafting teams of two subgroups of the policy network this year, including the environmental sustainability and generative AI value chain, as well as the AI governance, interoperability, and good practices. So I want to just thank the drafting teams for the hard work, and to the pen holders, Shamira and Ivana, as well as Yik-Chan, Chafic, Sergio, and Amado, for the excellent work in not only guiding the entire process, but also bringing these drafts to the current state they're in. As usual, as last time, we encourage everyone to give as much feedback as possible during this call. We hope that this session or this workshop will be interactive, but also for any offline or feedback comments that you might have, we have until the 30th of this month, so 8 days from now, to include any other feedback that might rise from there. So welcome to the call, and back to you, Maikki.
Thanks, Audace. That's a good reminder. There is indeed also a chance to give written feedback after this call if there's something we don't have time to discuss together. Good. So we go to our first agenda point, the first discussion paper today, environmental sustainability and the generative AI value chain. We have first Shamira, Ahmed, and Asyraf, Zulkifley, and the team leaders. And then we hear from Ivana Feldfeber, who is our guest today representing Data Genero. Shamira, would you like to share your screen, or would you be just...
Yes, let me share my screen. You need to allow me to share my screen. Hello, yes. Everyone.
You can share your screen. You're now a co-host.
Okay, thank you. See my screen? Yeah. presentation, presenter view. Can you see the slide?
Yes, it's perfect. Thanks, Shamira.
Okay, thank you for joining us today as we discuss the environmental sustainability and generative AI value chain. And before we get into the paper discussion, I want to just highlight what we are going to discuss. It is quite a long paper, but because of time constraints, we'll just focus on a few key areas. Firstly, the introduction of why we decided to focus on the generative AI value chain and environmental sustainability. We'll do an overview of comparing Gen AI versus traditional AI environmental impact, and we'll map the environmental toll of the Gen AI value chain like we have in the discussion paper. It's also an overview, and we'll list some of the priorities or some of our thinking in framing priorities for responsible global Gen AI governance initiatives. And then we'll also highlight some of the multi-stakeholder recommendations for policy action that we've highlighted in the discussion paper. In terms of the introduction, Gen AI technologies have potential to enhance efficiencies, but oftentimes they are also paradoxically creating an environmental burden, which disproportionately affects poor regions, and they do not benefit equally from digital dividends. So most of the discussions around the deployment and regulation of Gen AI globally are typically made by high-income countries and large corporations, and often sideline marginalized communities. And this phenomenon is the same in a lot of the climate governance frameworks, the global climate governance frameworks, which further perpetuate in unequal representation and multidimensional inequality. So although there has been emerging literature on sustainable AI to address environmental justice issues associated with AI development, there's still limited focus on the Gen AI specifically from a global majority lens and looking at the policy aspects of it. And that was the formation of the paper that we developed the outline that a lot of the people in the subgroup agreed on. And this is the final paper's outcome of that discussion. And also, I just like to remind everyone that this paper, the 2024 version, is expanding from the research we developed or the insights we developed in the last PNAI report. And this discussion paper specifically aims to foster multi-stakeholder dialogue and emphasize the need for policy interventions to support sustainable practices across the Gen AI value chain through case studies and global insights. So we definitely will appreciate your insights and contributions, as other speakers, Mikey and Audace, have said. And in terms of the overview of comparing Gen AI and traditional AI environmental impacts, we found 8 key aspects. This table is not in the appendix. I can add it if people require, and also I'm happy to share the slides. So from all of these key aspects, generally, the table outlines that Gen AI's need for larger data sets, higher energy needs, and more complex models often lead to high environmental costs compared to the traditional AI. And also, paradoxically, the potential for sustainable practices and applications is more prominent in traditional AI systems than Gen AI systems. And if we look at the example of model complexity, Gen AI typically involves larger, more complex models. Traditional AI uses simpler task-specific models. And in terms of the environmental applications and impact, the larger models require more computational power, and this leads to greater carbon emissions and energy constraints, and also water and for cooling and training data centers and training and deployment. So we've written some of these aspects in the discussion paper. And so it is quite concerning when we look at the different aspects of Gen AI versus traditional AI impacts. when we focused on mapping the environmental toll of the GenAI value chain, we also highlighted why we chose a value chain approach instead of a life cycle approach, and it's in the discussion paper as well. And I won't go into that for the sake of time. But when we look at the value chain, we mapped each stage of the value chain and highlighted the environmental impact. The common impacts that arose were resource strain, which included critical minerals, energy consumption, water usage, pollution, and waste, to name a few. So at each stage of the value chain, and this value chain was the model adapted from Harlin et al. We've highlighted that, and the resources also in our references. If you want to see that specific value chain model, you can look at that. But this is a value chain we use to summarize the environmental impact. And also we highlighted that this is a dynamic process. You can see from the multi-directional arrows, it's not a linear process. So it's a multi-directional and dynamic process depending on the use case of the GenAI. So there are things like data center demand, electricity usage, water consumption, environmental impact, and the resource strains associated with different stages of the GenAI value chain. And when we were looking at the priorities for environmental sustainability and responsible global GenAI governance initiatives, we focused on three main aspects, and this aligns with some of the aspects that's been in the Coalition for Digital Economy and Society, the Codes 2023 framework. So in terms of enablers, we thought of aligning vision, values, and objectives of the digital age with sustainable development. And we thought that systems thinking, multilateral action, a decolonial approach, and responsible innovation were crucial enablers for us to have responsible global GenAI governance initiatives. And the purpose focuses on a reorientation of digitalization and development of common visions, values, and renewed objectives for sustainable development. And in terms of priority 2, we thought of mitigation interventions on how to mitigate negative impacts. And we thought of things like reducing the digital divide, focusing on energy and emissions, including addressing energy poverty, rights violations that could arise from the deployment of database systems such as AI, and also multi-dimensional inequality. So the second shift essentially calls for commitment to sustainable digitalization to mitigate negative environmental and social impacts from digital technologies and database systems. And in terms of the third impact, this is what we hope to arise from responsible, the third priority, I beg your pardon. In terms of the third impact or the third priority, we looked at impact, and the impacts are focusing on positive aspects that could arise from ensuring have the enablers and mitigation priorities for responsible global GenAI governance initiatives. So the impact would be hopefully a just twin transition, and this is where we have progress where there's a conversion of digitalization and sustainability that looks at socioeconomic dimensions such as inequality, job creation, beyond just a green or digital transition. So it's looking at those transformative aspects simultaneously and making sure they're mutually reinforcing, looking at the circular economy, having more regenerative processes, and that move away from our linear extractive economy. Knowledge commons, this can be data commons, advocating for responsible open data, anticipatory governance, looking at ways to anticipate potential challenges. And this includes by looking at current inefficiencies in existing global governance. not only for climate change, but also for digitalization, for example. So we came up with 7 multi-stakeholder recommendations for policy action. And I see my time is up. These are highlighted in the paper as well, but I'll just list them quickly. Data governance with an environmental focus. We recommended strengthening inclusive global AI governance frameworks, integrating circular economy principles, supporting regionally relevant innovation ecosystems, and developing comprehensive sustainability metrics for Gen AI. We also highlighted there's a need to leverage official development assistance for sustainability Gen AI and apply decolonial socio-technical foresight as a policy action or a lens to inform our policy action. And that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shamira.
Yeah.
Should we jump directly to hear from Ivana and then take questions and comments to both at the same time? Good. Thanks a lot, Shamira. Ivana, would you like to share your screen or will you be just talking?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I would love to share my screen. Yeah.
Excellent. You can do it so now, and thanks for joining us. And please start when you are ready.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So my name is Ivana. I am the founder of DataGenero, as you introduced me perfectly. DataGenero is an NGO based in Argentina that is part of Chaya. Chaya is the Gender and Environment Data Alliance that I'm going to talk about a little bit here. We are thinking from the data point of view. We know that without data, there is no AI. So we are focusing on gathering better data to have better processes in general. So Chaya aims to improve availability, accessibility, understanding, and application of quality and robust data and information in the intersection of gender and environment. So we want to bring this discussion. We know that climate change and environment have different impacts on the lives of women, LGBTQ+ people, rural communities, people with disabilities or with issues with accessibility. So we know there are a lot of gaps in the data regarding climate and intersectionality, and we want to improve those processes. We have a lot of organizations supporting Chaya and founding members, and then we have a lot of organizations behind the work that Chaya is doing daily. So Chaya was introduced in 2022, and nowadays it has 90 members, like organizations, not individuals, and 26 individuals in the advisory group. So the objectives of Chaya are to compile and review, to communicate, to create capacity building, and to influence policy making regarding gender and environment intersection using data, using evidence. We have this structure. DataGenero, my organization, is part of the steering committee. We are based in Argentina, and we have people from all over the place. And we have the steering committee, then we have the core partners, we have members, and then we have our network. And also we have the advisory group, funding partners, and we have people that want to join, organizations that want to join. So every year we have, like, on a rolling basis, a form so people can join the network regarding gender and environment data. So I mentioned before the term intersectionality. I think regarding AI, data, technology, it's really important not to only think about gender. It's not only for women that we are fighting for. We are putting it in an intersectional point of view. So to have a transformation, we need everyone on board, and we need to understand the lives and the experiences of different people with different oppressions, and not put it in a we are worse than the other. It's not working like that. So for us, it's really important. That's why we always put this quote about for Kimberly Crenshaw. And we have a glossary with all different information. If you don't know about climate justice or you don't know about intersectionality, we have a glossary in our web. I'm going to put it in the chat. So we want to think about the data processes regarding gender and environment, and where does this data originate and who generates it. We have a lot of missing data, a lot, and that's a huge worry for us because we can't measure, we can't see where it's not working and how people are being affected by climate change and the environment. Where is that data? Who can access it? How was it gathered? Who has the access to an ownership of the data, and how is it used? If it's being used at all. Sometimes the data is just there and it's not very good to work with. So now we have two main goals. We have the small grants and we have the indicators dashboard. We're working to build better indicators to measure. And we also are giving grants to different organizations in the Global South to produce data on this intersection of gender and environment. The winners of these grants are these 5 organizations and projects, and we are really, really happy with them. We are accompanying them in the process of gathering the data and creating these reports, and it's really one of a kind in the world. We're really happy to do this. And this is our website. I'm going to share all the links in the chat now, and I'm really happy to have this discussion regarding generative AI, the impacts on the environment, and also from an intersectional point of view.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivana. Very interesting things, and I guess we could have given you 1 hour to hear more, but a good introduction to the topic. I think with this we are ready to open the floor for questions and comments on this topic. And you attendees can give suggestions and views on the PNAI discussion paper that was presented by Shamira, or you can ask Ivana about the work that was presented in 5 minutes now. And I'm thinking, Amrita, would you like to facilitate this discussion, or should I go on?
No, you can go ahead, Mikey. That's perfectly fine.
Good. So please raise your hand if you want to ask a question or you have a comment. And alternatively, you can write it in a chat for everyone to see. But it's always more fun when we have some live interaction. Good. So let's get started. And of course, if we have people from the drafting team, we will be very happy to also give you the floor if there's something you want to add on the discussion paper or the topic in general. And I see Ivana is sharing some links, so I guess you can check those out. Yes, Amrita is writing, please free to.
Yes, because these documents has been, more or less things have been done by the teams. These needs to be finalized. So it would be good if you can give your comments, suggestions to improve it. And I think Mikey would be sharing that now in the documents, the most important part is editing it and reducing the sizes so that it is crisper. Not only this part, but the other things, as in the working group members have really worked hard over the months. So if you have any questions, comments, you can share it because, they've been working on it in a particular way. Not huge things to be changed, but just in case there are certain things you feel needs to be added.
Thanks, Shamira. Yes, it was some work that we shortened some of these discussion papers a bit. So thanks again to our all drafters and team leaders for this good cooperations and patience. Okay, good. I don't see any hands yet, so would you like to say something, Audace, on this first paper on environmental sustainability and generative AI?
Audace? Yeah, thanks, Amrita, and Mikey. One thing that I really liked is that there was an approach of a way forward, especially a multi-stakeholder approach at the end, and that every aspect of the value chain was taken into account. I think most of the time, data is often, especially training data, is often disregarded, but the fact that open data standards were also discussed as one of the way forwards was an interesting fact. I think that there still will be some work to do in trimming the discussion paper down to an acceptable level, but congratulations to the team. Yeah.
Thanks, Audace.
If no one has anything to say, I'd just like to say thank you. Oh, I see Patrick's hand. Okay, I'll intervene for now. I just want to say thank you to Ivana and also for highlighting Jedda's work. I think we take it for granted that environmental data is like Earth observation data or data from Internet of Things, but it's important to also look at the intersectional dynamics of who's impacted by data and how this will be used in database systems such as AI. So I'm really glad that we're having that discussion, narrowing down to the agenda, data, and environmental dynamics and how that could impact future anticipatory governance of AI systems from a climate justice, intergenerational justice kind of lens. So thank you.
Thank you, Shamira. Yeah, we have had some discussions regarding AI in JADA. That's why I came here. I am an expert on AI, so we are working mostly on the harms and the risks about generative AI and these big large language models. And we had some issues with Amazon in particular that wanted us to join a hackathon on climate and gender data and for AI, like AI solutions for gender and climate change. And all the community said, we don't want to be a part of this because Amazon is a huge part of the problem and creating a small hackathon won't solve these issues and AI won't be a solution to human problems. So that's kind of where we are in the discussion. This is not a closed discussion, it's an open one, but I think it has many difficult points and layers of the discussion. It's not that simple.
There are 3 hands, Mikey. Patrick, Yik, and Omar.
Thanks. Let's start with Patrick. I think he was there first. Patrick, the floor is yours for your question or comment.
Hey. Oh, thank you. Thank you, first of all, to the pen holders and to the leaders of the discussion. I think you did a really good job in framing these issues because while there's a lot of focus on the benefits of AI, there isn't a whole lot of focus on the huge environmental impact, and especially in terms of data centers, energy consumption, and the intersectionality that exists between generative AI and different models. So my question, I guess, is this. Well, we're trying to make the paper smaller, obviously. I was wondering if there was any thought given to alternative methods of computation that are less energy intensive, because they use the massive data centers, but now there are emerging technologies such as quantum or neuromorphic computing that use radically, maybe about a tenth as much energy, and when they're combined with, for example, AI, I know this is like cutting edge stuff, that perhaps there would be some crossover, that you can offer alternative methods, basically, to be able to achieve the same, the same result, if you will, because one of the things that it's fascinating to me is that, like you said, Amazon, the other, you might call them AI powerhouses, are pushing a certain agenda, you might say, or pushing a certain methodology. And when in reality, there are different methodologies that you can use to get to the same result. So that's, I guess, a question and a comment.
Thank you, Patrick. I think, Amrita, for the records, I agree with you that just sharing that these are energy guzzling or environmentally, more, I would say, more non-environmental or taking up more energy from the environment is one thing, but the next step is what next? In fact, I was just going to say this is perhaps if in the next year PNAI is there, perhaps they could look at what could be the alternative options, because Gen AI or the next kind of technologies are going to be there. But what could be the technologies and they could be using, which could be less costly for the environment. I'm not too sure whether they can look at it at this point of time, but perhaps in the next year's work. But Yik, over to you.
Can I just make a comment on that while it's fresh? So I think there was a recent announcement that Google has bought 5 nuclear plants. I think that's telling of the energy consumption. And also for quantum computing, there's a lot of hype, and there's not really widespread or scalable usability that we have the same way that generative AI is being used, the same ubiquity. So I think that's part of the challenge. We don't know what will happen next year, but I think the fact that Google has made such an investment in 5 nuclear power plants to revitalize them, and which they expect to be up and running in 2033 or 2035, the next 5 to 7 years, is indicative of the energy requirements and increasing energy requirements, and that's their short solution. So I think it's interesting to see how everything will develop, and it'll probably, that's a nice, I think, comment that we'll think of, and also highlight it as future research potential. Thank you.
Thanks, Shamira. I think we could take now a question or comment from Yik Chang next.
Yes, thank you, Shamina. Very impressive analysis, as I said, is very comprehensive. So I think there's 2 comments. The first one is actually, would you, of course, it's not for this year, next year, probably can we, if the subgroup can do a scan of the existing, environmental policy towards the generative AI in different countries, because as far as I know, like in China, the Chinese government already have some policy concerned, which is to try to address the environmental impact. So probably if we can have a scan, so we can learn, what's going on across the regions. I think that's one just suggestion for next year. And the other minor point is about you use the term, decolonization. I think we had a kind of discussion before whether do you think we can still use these terms, decolonization, or use more mild terms? So, but it's up to the subgroup to decide. It's just my personal comments. I think that's all. Thank you very much, Shamira. Thank you.
Thanks, Yik Chang. Shamira, would you like?
Yes, Yik Chang, yes, I know it's quite contested to highlight decolonization. And I also highlighted we will have a glossary to highlight what we mean by decolonization. I think when people talk about decolonization, it's always not met with a positive reaction. And we've had this discussion before, so we can discuss it further and have a different output. But I think highlighting decolonization also highlights the aspects of the entrenched power dynamics in geopolitics and in global value chains and in the climate governance. There's so many power dynamics that are based on historical contexts that are perpetuated by the historical power dynamics and how global value chains and multilateralism was developed at the global stage from historical circumstances. So that's why we highlight decolonization. But yeah, that's for further discussion. And thank you for the feedback on having environmental impact for Gen AI policies. I think that would be interesting to see how that develops in the next. I'm sure there's very few at the moment, but it would be interesting to see how that develops, especially from a global majority lens. Thanks you.
Thank you both. And next we go to Omar.
Yeah, so thank you so much for giving me the floor. And first of all, thank you so much for the hard work that you are doing to develop the document. So my recommendation would be that as I was one of the panelists for Global Digital Compact, and it was one of my suggestions there that we also need to focus on the rating system for generative AI as well, so that we can identify how eco-friendly their computing system is and how they are impacting the environment, so that we can better address the issues of generative AI. And also we can use AI to mitigate climate change and also to prevent issues that might be very harmful for the humankind, because generative AI can think like human, even sometimes better than human. So maybe we can utilize their ability. And also my suggestion would be that we also need to focus on eco-friendly AI training programs, because when we develop generative AI, there are a lot of training programs behind it, and it requires a lot of infrastructures and energy, which may have a bad impact on the nature. So that's why I think eco-friendly training system is also needed. And most importantly, we also need collaboration to address this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Shamira and other team members, if you wish.
I think Asyraf was not available. I don't see other team members. But I want to say thank you, Omar, for your comments, and we hope we can get them in writing as well. It's easier to remember. Thank you for your feedback and comments.
Thanks, Shamira. I think now we could give the floor quickly to Ivana. Ivana, is there anything that you'd like to say from your work or experience to this previous discussion and comments on, for example, alternative tech solutions and eco-friendly training courses and the meaning and importance of decolonization and decolonizing approach to this work? Even if you have anything to add, please
Thank you.
go ahead.
I always think about how we are thinking about creating different ways of relating to AI. We are being proposed like one or two ways of being connected with AI, but via these 5 huge companies, 6 maybe. But there are other ways to create AI in a more sustainable way. We are developing an AI to gather better data on gender-based violence in the judicial system in Latin America. And this AI is not a huge language model. It's not the state-of-the-art model. It's just a model that detects entities and puts them in a data set, or detects entities and redacts them, puts them like anonymous. So it's not fancy, it's not like sexy, like they want to portray the AI, but it's sustainable, it's more transparent, and it doesn't have the footprint, the carbon footprint that many large language models have in their training and during our prompts like ChatGPT. So we need more experiences of AI created differently and more sustainable way, and also creating AI in our countries and to have be sovereign over the AI that we are creating and not depending on these big companies and their products to use AI. So we have to work with universities, with civic society, and with local companies to create AI products that are smaller and more well thought of and more located to our contexts. So we need to decentralize it too. I think that it's really important because tomorrow maybe Google or OpenAI will charge for all of these things and our countries won't be able to pay for that. So we need to have other ways to use AI and to connect with AI. I think that is key. And if we think about it from our countries, it will be also cheaper and more sustainable from an environment point of view. But we need to start giving the discussion, what's the AI that we want for our countries and how can we build it in a sustainable way?
Thanks, Ivana. Next, we have a comment from Daniel.
Hi.
Yes, please share
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to make a question or suggestion in terms of a consistency to the forum we participated, because the group took much care in preparing this paper and mentioning all the variables associated. But while I was searching the paper, I didn't find the word internet. So internet as a mean, as a way for us to make all this conversation possible. Not sure if this is relevant to bring some connections to the forum itself. For me, it was important to make it clear that we are having this AI conversation just because internet first exists. So we are talking about hardware, we are talking about cloud, but this all transited over internet protocols. So how you see that? Thank you.
Shamira or Ivana, please respond or comment.
I could just try something, Shamira, and then you can add. I think these discussion papers would fit into the main policy network on AI's paper, and when it is made, certain backgrounds would be given as to what is the genesis of this paper, etc. And I think the reason why they have not specified on internet primarily is because it is taken for granted here and they have limitations to the number of words, etc. But the basic tenets of why this discussion is happening and what the policy network on PNAI's mandate is from the IGF would be spelled out at least in the first few lines. But if you think there is something else should be added, it could be done. But Shamira, over to you if you want to add something else.
Yes, thank you, Amrita. And just to expand on that, yes, we do take it for granted that internet is part of the is like underlying enabler. But we do highlight in terms of our policy responses, mitigating the digital divide, and obviously that's on internet access, meaningful connectivity, devices use, and so on. So we do highlight some of that. And based on the value chain we were looking at, I think that raises an important critical question that there's a lot of assumptions on the Gen AI value chain analysis from ecosystems with more AI maturity, which have higher internet penetration and higher populations using and accessing the internet. So I think that's important that we should highlight that. And the model we chose for the value chain approach was from the global north, because there's not a lot of studies from the global south or the global majority or ecosystems with less internet. And I think we will highlight that. Thank you for that comment. We might not go into detail, but we have highlighted there's a digital divide, and we were focusing on the environmental aspects at different different sections of the value chain. So we didn't focus on the internet and connectivity aspect when we were doing that value chain analysis. But thank you for your comment.
Thanks, Shamira. Ivana, do you have anything to add or share? Okay, great. I think we are shortly running out of time, but we have links and chats from Lufuno, Hiram, Carol, and others in the chat. So I hope Shamira and the team will have a look on all these materials that we shared later on. And could we ask you, Shamira, to finalize this session by sharing what's the most important recommendation from your list of recommendations, or what's the most important thing or learning from your paper that you would like to leave everybody with?
Well, I think there is a lot of learnings, but I think just in line with the IGF and the policy network on AI, it's important to have multi-stakeholder collaboration to coordinate, collaborate, and co-create interventions that reflect the local realities of different stakeholders. And I appreciate that we need to have both a top-down and a bottom-up approach to creating contextually relevant interventions. So that's my final feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Shamira. And thank you to you and the whole team for all the hard work you have done. And it's excellent to have the draft paper now with us. Good. I think, unless there is anything from Audace or Amrita, we could move on to the next discussion paper. Good. Okay. So AI governance, interoperability, and good practices. From the drafting team of this paper, we have Yik-Chan, Chafic, and Hiram who will present the paper. And Chafic asked me to share the PowerPoint, so give me a moment to share the correct.
Thank you, Miyaki, but I have an issue sharing my slides.
Sharing, here we go. I hope it looks familiar to you now. And please start your presentation when you are.
Okay, great. First, thank you, Miyaki. Thank you, everyone who joining us today. It was a great discussion from the first part with my colleagues and excellent work. So I will start from the question or from where Ivana and De Arantes end. Ivana asked how to have a global, sustainable, affordable AI. And our colleague De Arantes asked a very critical question: what is the role of internet and all of this, and why it's not mentioned? So I believe that our work in this section will cover parts of this. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. This part of workshop will walk you through our research and finding of the AI governance, interoperability, and good practices subsection for the PNAI report 2024, which reflects really months of work from our dedicated team. So this subsection explores the different AI activities, regulations, policies drafted by countries and regions. It examines the convergence and divergence among these. It identifies the gaps, and at the end, we suggest a recommendation for strengthen a global AI interoperability and governance. Just before I start with the slides, as a member and co-leader for this subgroup, it has been a challenging and rewarding journey. First, thanks for Miyaki for her support. Thanks for the Audace and Shamira for their support too. And while mainly we have a lot of volunteered colleagues to contribute to our work, so at the end it was a small committed team to do the search and the work. And here is another risk for multi-stakeholder. So multi-stakeholder is not about only multi-stakeholder, but it's about to commit to the multi-stakeholder that we are promoting and advocating for. So this was a note that I want to share with you before I start our presentation. So let's go through these slides, and I will hand over later to my colleague Hiram and Yekichan. Next slide, please, Mayaki. Thank you. So this subsection work around three primary concepts that drive today's discussion. First and most crucial key concept is the interoperability. We agreed to use the definition agreed upon in the last year PNAI report, which consists of three core pillars: the foundational tools and mechanism for AI, multi-stakeholder interactions, and creation or consensus on communication between systems. For more details on this, please, I invite you to look into the 2023 report. You have all the details on this framework. Next, we have, of course, the AI governance, which refers to process, policies, and how AI systems are developed and operated. And we have the global AI governance, which is the cooperative process where global interests intersect. And finally, we have the good practice, guidelines, strategies that ensure AI systems are developed and used in an ethical, responsible, and beneficial way. Next slide, please. In 2024, we witnessed significant progress in AI governance across various national and regional efforts. And our report, this subsection outlined these in details. I can start with the UN, where two major resolutions were passed, promoting global capacity building, regulatory framework for AI. We have the Global Digital Compact, where our group or PNAI contributed to its open consultation, promoting interoperable AI standards and data governance frameworks. Regionally, we can say the African Union introduced the Continental AI Strategy and African Digital Compact. In the Southeast Asian countries, they developed what they call Guide on AI Governance and Ethics, focusing on internal governance structures and stakeholder communication. In the Middle East region and in my region, there is the Arab AI Council, which aims to foster knowledge sharing and resources to boost AI development across the region, and its focus mainly on best practices and regional interoperability. For Europe, we highlight the Council of Europe AI Treaty and the European AI Office, which are ensuring the AI development aligned, which ensure that the AI developments align with ethical principles, safety, and the human rights. For Europe, we have the Council of Europe, next slide. So for next slide. We included also here in the slide other regions as well, like Latin America, US, UK, and China, where there are ongoing efforts to adopt AI governance to their national context. But for the sake of time, I will not go through the details. You will find more insights and details in the paper that Miyake and my colleagues share the link. So to sum up for these three slides, what we are seeing is an increasing number of initiatives aimed at creating national and regional AI governance framework, with some modest efforts in the global scene. But the main question remains, and the change remains, how do we align all these diverse efforts on a global scale? So our subsection identifies these gaps and suggests recommendation for addressing this the issue of AI interoperability on a global scale. I leave the floor to my colleague Hiram, who will continue from here, and recommendation will be covered by my colleague Yekichan. Hiram, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Chafic, for that wonderful rundown. So moving on to like what kind of gaps we see in the global AI governance scenario right now, we see a lot of fragmentation because each region seems to be developing its own set of regulations, and they often have different kinds of thresholds. They often have different kinds of things they want to prioritize. We want to be cognizant of the fact that every region has its own values, has its own needs and wants. But at the same time, we do want to highlight that there is a lack of input, particularly from the global south. There is a lack of coordination. There is also some sort of a degree of lack of trust in the global process. Maybe there's a problem with what kind of technical incompatibilities there might arise in terms of monitoring systems or auditing systems in the future, or what kind of effects it will have on things like global south countries wanting to use and leverage AI in innovative cycles to achieve SDG goals. Like I was pointing out earlier, there's like a certain set of insufficient multi-stakeholder collaboration. The GDC also points this out. The GDC also sets out that interoperability is one of its key objectives. And there's a sense of siloed integration, since a lot of these current AI systems, they are being developed in a very specific part of the world. And there is a lot of the other countries are playing catch up in terms of setting up data protection authorities and in terms of setting up AI safety institutes and so on. If you could quickly move on to the next slide. Yes, so we have identified 3 key aspects which we have dived into the paper. These are the sets of gaps across legal frameworks, technical standards we see, and data and privacy regulation. The framework we adopted was looking at what kind of top-down regulations exist, what kind of bottom-up regulations exist in different regions, what is the level of integration, and what is the kind of binding nature and principles of these different kinds of regulations. When we come to legal frameworks, we see that there is a difference in maturity level. Certain stakeholders have a lot more disproportionate influence over what kind of happens in the international system. And we also see that they have a lot more control because AI systems at the frontier are being developed in their countries. There is a differences in terms of what kind of risk thresholds people are setting. Like I was talking about earlier, what I might say something is high risk for me, and somebody else might come in and say that might be a little bit lower risk. Moving on to technical standards, we see that there is a sense of just generally what kind of technical standards we want, what level of influence the government should have in these kinds of processes is varying from region to region. We have seen an example of compute thresholds being coming up. We have seen certain countries take a much more market-driven approach in terms of having non-binding voluntary commitments, and certain other countries and regulations wanting to have a lot more hands-on approach. There is inconsistency in the terms of like what kind of technical specific standards we have, which might like cause some sort of divergence. We might all be using the same words: responsible, trustworthy, safe, but in practice, when push comes to shove, we might end up having different enforcement regimes. And moving on finally to data and privacy, there is an absence of data protection laws across a lot of countries, particularly in the global south. There is, again, in terms of data flows, in terms of cross-border data flows and where these data centers are kept, where this data is processed, there's disproportionate influence of certain countries. We also pointed out that any kind of data compliance ends up making it harder for MSMEs, particularly in global south countries, to get onto the same level of competition as perhaps a slightly better resourced player, which has like innovation and downstream effects on the whole startup ecosystem. And now that we have talked a lot about the gaps, I will give the floor to Dr. Yip Chan so that we can talk a little bit about what kind of recommendations we see coming out of these to solve these gaps. Over to you, Dr. Yip Chan.
Thank you, Harami. Yeah, can you, actually our recommendation is based on the, the existing research and also the policy we just present. So we scanned all the existing policy and regulation, the initiative. So based on that, we have kind of analytical models, but we didn't present the model here. You can find the model in our paper. So this is our recommendation. So basically the recommendation cover the three sectors, which is legal, technical, and the data interoperability. But first of all, we will give some general recommendation, which is called three sectors. So the first one is about we need to define the global priority area. Because what we found is that, just a moment, let me close my window. Sorry. Yeah, so what we found is that there's a different initiative which have a different priority for interoperability. So therefore, at the global level, we need to identify, the key priority. For example, like whether it's AI safety, risk governance, or technical standard, or AI training data set. So then we can have the concrete policy to tackle this. So first of all, we need to find a priority area in terms of global interoperability. And secondly is to establish the compatibility mechanism. In our report, we already identified some very effective existing mechanism which can facilitate interoperability. And for example, like have the AI safety institution across the different region and also testing mechanism. But we found, we recommend that there's an extra compatibility mechanism needs to establish to facilitate. For example, like we talk about the mutual recognition of regulatory outcome agreement and the recognition of protection certificate or joint AI safety testing or harmonization of regulatory framework and extras. So we need to have an extra additional compatibility mechanism. And the third one is about a balance between soft law and hard law approach, just as Shamira mentioned. And most of the initiative we found actually is soft law approach, which is non-binding, it's like a guidance, best practice. But we found in order for the interoperability to be more effective, we need to have a combination of both the binding and the non-binding. So therefore, we can have a balanced approach to AI governance and interoperability, because the past experience already approved. Non-binding is not really, in the end, it's not really effective. And so we can recommend we have a combining multi-stakeholder co-regulation with technical AI solution as a preferable approach for the AI governance and also interoperability. Next slide, please. And the third general recommendation is fourth is we found a lot of some global initiative did not really take the local needs into consideration when they're making the global recommendation. And also we found it's quite effective to establish cross-regional partnership, as we've seen already, in Latin America, in Europe, even in Asian countries, and the regional collaboration is quite a permanent force at the moment. So therefore, we recommend the UN work closely with the regional bodies, especially those at the Global South. So beyond the OECD, we know there's a lot of collaboration between UN and Europe, but also beyond, can collaborate with the Asians, with the One Belt and Road, those Global South regional collaborations, in order to prevent existing disparities and also commit to diverse and open global multi-stakeholder engagement in the global agreement, especially strengthen the IGF, because many my colleagues already mentioned, in order for IGF to effectively implement the GDC, there's a need to have long-term sustainability mechanism to support IGF, including the financial, technical, and the human resource support. And the last one is about capacity building in countries like lack of resource and expertise. Okay, next, please. So for the legal interoperability, we have some recommendation. There's a three mini. So one is leverage the global international regulatory interoperability principle in the local policy making. So when the local regional policy making makers, when they think about AI governance, they could take into consideration of the global and international principle or best practice. The second one is increase the international regulatory collaborations and to reduce the unnecessary costs and the barriers. And the third one is developing a global framework, especially for AI risk categorization, because we saw, we observed AI risk categorization and mitigation are the most urgent issues endorsed by many countries. But there's a different AI risk categorization, which create a divergent approach and also mitigation approach. So therefore, we need to have a global framework in terms of AI risk categorization. Next, please. So in terms of technical interoperability recommendation, so we suggest promote the global alignments on AI standard, but this has to be scientifically grounded and respect international law and also international interoperability mechanisms such as the true standard practice. And also, we found it's quite useful, based on research, use AI technology to increase interoperability. For example, like AI can help us to standardize, clean, and structured data to improve interoperability. And also, like, for example, development interoperability platforms, so different systems can work together in that system, through that system. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is our last final recommendation in terms of data and privacy interoperability. So we need to have a global data framework, and this data framework actually is drawn on the existing international regional data privacy protection guidance. So therefore, we can facilitate the sharing of AI training data and also the cross-border data flow. And the second one is develop international data commons. So this is quite a popular practice in Europe, but it's also promoted by other countries like China. They also produce this international data commons, not international like regional or international, but we probably need a global one as well. And also, it's interoperability between national data protection legal framework and AI governance. So we found that there's a different, national data protection legal framework. So we need to have a consistent interoperable framework to facilitate different data protection legal framework. So there's several mechanisms you can use, for example, like a mandatory transparency obligation and data protection impact assessments, and also respect data subject rights. We can include all these things into a develop a consistent and interoperable global data framework. And contextualization solution for data privacy. We found, we suggest also to consider the unique needs and the context of different region and industries when talking about the data privacy, because there's a cultural diversity as well. So this is also important to have a flexible and adaptive approach in terms of address the data protection and the data protection interoperability. And also international organization, regional or multilateral organization could create a coherent data governance strategy, especially for just like Hiram mentioned, in a lot of the African country and the developing country, they haven't had a data protection framework yet because they lack the resources and expertise. So therefore, we need to have some organization besides UN, but also regional multilateral organization to put resources to create this kind of data governance strategies. Okay, I think this is our final slides. Thank you very much. So, and a lot of the information you can find in our report, and we also welcome your comments and suggestions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yik-chan. Thanks, Hiram and Chafic too. You did good job in keeping it relatively short, because we all know your discussion paper is extensive but full of important things to say. So now we open the floor for asking questions or comments. So you can raise your digital hand, or you can also write in the chat. First, we have Patrick. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you again for this paper. I found it really interesting, and I think you did an admirable job of trying to cover what is a very complex policy area. And I commend you for including this rubric that I think it really serves to put a handle on this. I like the Venn diagram that you did of the 3 different policy areas. The thing that I was really interested in particular is this idea of developing a further research agenda, you might call it, for next steps, in particular with regard to risk governance. This is a specialty of mine. And one of the things that I was interested in is how you would operationalize risk. And one of the ways that I thought might be interesting is to look at diffusion. As the amount of technology, as this AI technology, diffuses, ever more, I would say, with a greater velocity, and the amount of the volume and the variety of places that it's diffusing to, it would be interesting to define what, risk means in that context. And as a question, one of the things that I think is important to include, and I know the paper's already long enough, maybe this will be in an appendix, possibly, would be this. How do you address issues that, without being too, I'll just be diplomatic, such as crime, such as not just misinformation, but in particular issues regarding to adversarial AI? And would there be ways to define, for example, rules of engagement regarding adversarial AI in a multilateral governance context? Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Yikchan, Chafic, Heram, which one of you would like to respond to that? Or
I can start with a quick reply. Thank you, Patrick, for your comment. And risk is everywhere. It's not only in AI. So if you go to the AI ecosystem, you can see risk in development, risk in usage, risk in governance, risk everywhere. So I believe each one of us is responsible to mitigate these risks. But I agree with you. It's a long research, and we need to keep it on in our mind. Thank you.
Yes, thanks if you don't add too many more pages, even if there are still things that your group didn't say. Yikchan, do you want to add something? Or
Yeah, I think very good recommendation. That could be another paper on risk, And so I think our observation is that we found a different. Our main concern is the interoperability. How we found a different region like UK, US, and EU just have a joint declaration about what is risk, in competition. So different regions have different definition about risk and the scope of risk, how to mitigate risk. And if we look at the Chinese government just released guidance last month, that risk definition is so broad, including like a disinformation, lack of the literacy, capacity, even the capacity building become a risk. So, but if we look at the EU's approach, it's very narrowly defined. So the issue for us is really, we need to have interoperability in terms of definition, and also in terms of strategy, and also scope, even the scope of risk. So that is, I think in the end we have at a global level we need to have a very minimum kind of the understanding of the risk. But at the regional and the national level, they have very different approach, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Well, then perhaps without being too forward, maybe that could be one of the recommendations, is that there should be, in addition to our 4 subgroups, maybe there should be another group that looks specifically at AI risk, or in general have a paper that says we're going to explain more what AI risk is, and then we could have a multilateral, stakeholder basically engagement on defining AI risk. Because I know that there are various, and organizations that are looking at this. And I know that this is something that's not going to go away. It's only going to get, I would say, more important in the future.
Yeah, we can add this as a recommendation, and we can add this as one recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Now we go on to Kwaku. Kwaku, please share your question or comment with us.
All right. Okay, thank you so much for the team. Nice presentation. So yes, I'm just following up, but I think it's important in terms of the scope that you've given us in terms of interoperability. But let me just give a simple analogy, and maybe my question will be just as simple as it is. You know, like when you are driving, you have the driving code, which you have global standards. Are there any way in which we want people to adhere to this kind of globalized standards in terms of interoperability? Because we've seen it in the internet in terms of traffic, being able to traffic and also make phone calls or telephone, for example. So it's just a suggestion. I don't know whether it's a question, but we can look at it. So that's my question or my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Heram Yikchang is at Chafic. Any response or reflection from your side?
Just one reflection that this is what we are pushing for, to have the experience of the internet governance. So in order not to reinvent the wheel for the AI governance, let's have the experience, lesson learned from internet governance to be applied to AI. Like this, we can, have a lot of, we don't waste our time in reinventing the wheels, and we can use the best practice from the internet governance. But yes, it was a good question. Thank you, Kawaku.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kawaku. Yeah, actually, the 2DC dynamic correlation of the IGF already organized the main sections on these topics. In this is the IGF, which is to talk about how to use the internet principle core values to govern the AI. For example, like openness of internet protocol. How can we use this, to govern the AI? So this is definitely an approach. I think a lot of people will recognize as the principle values of internet governance can be applied to the AI governance. So welcome. I can share the section among I sent to Mikey later on. So this is a main section organized by 2DCs to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment is coming from Audace. Audace, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mikey. I actually had more of a question, especially on the contextualization of governance. I was wondering if there are any use cases, scenario, or industries that you identify that already are adapting this type of contextualization or that could benefit from this contextualization.
Yeah, we use the ASEAN countries' cases because they have a guidance which is adapted by ASEAN countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and actually we found that they are even within this guidance they have a different kind of pace to implement it. So this is one example. We put it in an appendix as a good practice. And we also, I think there's a Chinese case, but I think we remove it because the limit of the pages we can have. So how the China used like a demonstration, to develop the internal interoperability and also international interoperability. We did have two case studies, but if it is allowed, we probably can add it back. Thank you. Maybe other team member can say something.
What I can add on this, Audace, that we can see this best practice on a regional level, yes. But this is what we are searching for. On the global level, we don't have anything. Just we have these initiatives led by UN. And I believe this paper should be like a kickoff or start to discuss initiatives on a global level.
Yeah, I also just very quickly want to add that we also see like maybe regions should share best practices amongst each other. We do recognize that there is context, there is specific kinds of capacity which people have. Specifically on the point of like industry applications, like companies seem to also be taking note of safety summits which are happening and putting out voluntary commitments. And we've also seen like the whole Council of Europe International Treaty play out. That's maybe like the closest we have got, although it was a fair bit watered down. Yeah.
Thanks, Hiram. Thanks the others from the team. I think now we have time for one last question. It's from Omar. Omar, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Mikey, for giving the floor. So my suggestion would be establishing a framework, a governance framework for explainable AI that prioritizes human understanding, and also for the especially for the non-technical stakeholders like me. So this could involve user-friendly visualizations of AI decision-making processes, and that might help a lot of stakeholders to better understand the processes and what's happening around them. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And reflections or responses from the drafting team?
Just that we are very talent constrained. I know for a fact that the UK AI Safety Institute is looking to hire more and more people, and this is true across the board. And yeah, communication is super important. The gap between technical and policy just seems to be growing faster and faster. Yeah, by the time we have some sort of regulation, it's like the whole sort of generation of AI has changed because it's just moving so fast. So very good point.
Yeah, I think the technical standard actually is the most intensive, I cannot say it's a competition, but we see obviously there's a competition, between different bodies in terms of like at the global level, regional level, and also national level. So ITU and also other bodies, IEEE, they're trying to establish this global technical framework. I think ITU will just consolidate, the effort together. So if you look at into our report, we will highlight ITU's efforts into to establish a kind of the global technical framework as well. But we also see the competition because actually the technical standards become a competition area between different powers. So there is some obstacle to overcome at the moment. Yeah. So please refer to our report, and we did mention about ITU and how to consolidate the global framework.
Thanks, Yik-chan. We received through the chat from Firdaus information on what's going on in Malaysia. I'm sure our team representatives will read carefully this insight as well as all the other links and messages in the chat and take it into account. And of course, you can all still send in written comments to the link that was also shared in the chat. Okay, good. Okay, I think it's then time to thank Yik-chan, Chafic, Hiram, and the full team for this excellent and very extensive work. And before we move to our last agenda item, which is next steps, of course, I'll give the floor to Audace to give some final thanks and reflections. And after that, it's still back to me for the practicalities and dates and next steps. So Audace, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to thank both the drafting teams for the excellent work. And just to remind everybody that we still have 8 days for the inputs on this drafts. Obviously, we'll need to shorten them, so there's still a lot of work ahead. But just want to thank also the guest speaker today, Ivana, for joining the call and sharing your presentation. And I'll hand over to Mikey to also talk about formulation of policy equations for our session this year.
Thanks, Audace. Oh, now it's working. indeed, thanks teams for this, but there is still a lot to do. So these have been now the draft discussion papers, and next we will all give any remaining feedback in writing to these two discussion papers and to these two drafting teams. And the deadline for written comments is on the 30th of October, so end of this month. And next, our drafting teams will go back to their drafting boards, I suppose, and they will take into account all this feedback and questions that we heard in this call and in the chat, and all the written comments that are still to come. And the teams will create the final versions of these discussion papers, and we will then publish them on the website. But at the same time, we are already preparing for our PNAI session that will be held at the IGF annual meeting in December. And our next PNAI Multistakeholder Working Group meeting will be in 1 month on Thursday, 21st of November. And before that, we would like to ask everybody to leave your speaker suggestions or any other comments and ideas that we should take into account as we prepare for a PNAI session at IGF's annual meeting. And we would like to ask especially our 4 subgroups to make use now of all the learnings that you have on top of your heads after all this work on the discussion papers, and see if there are some speaker names or some questions or some specific topics that we should raise with our speaker of expert or our panel of expert speakers at the IGF annual meeting. So if there was something that should be further discussed or something we should raise with the speakers at the panel discussion, please go ahead and add it into our Google Doc that has our plans for the PNAI session, and also a matrix where you can put speaker names. Good. All these tasks are always going through the subgroups, so we are very happy to have you. Good. So with this group, we will see each other on the 21st of November. And in the meantime, we will be in touch with the subgroups and team leaders to get those discussion papers finalized.
I think Shamira has raised her hand.
Shamira.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight the importance of sending written contributions to the discussion papers, because it's easier for us to list you and acknowledge you as contributors. Then it's easier if we have written feedback and also your details, then we can follow up and include you as contributors to the discussion papers. That's why we emphasize sending written comment. So we'd like to acknowledge your hard work and contribution. So please write your feedback in the discussion papers. Thank you.
Thanks, Shamira. 100% agreed. And I put in the chat once again the link where you can see both discussion papers and where you can see also this Google Docs where you can add written comments. Good. With this, there are already thank you messages appearing to the chat. So thank you a lot to our team leaders and volunteers in the drafting teams. And thanks for all of you who joined us today to give feedback. So the work continues, and see you again with this group in 1 month. Good. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.